Great.
Okay.
And my name is Jordy Izzard, and I'm here as an Alumni Relations Officer at SAIS, and I'm interviewing Wally Spalding, who's from the SAIS class of 1951, and today's date is April 20th, 2011, and thanks so much for being here.
Sure.
And we're just going to kind of have a conversation, go down memory lane, and we'll start, as we discussed, with the question of kind of what originally brought you to SAIS.
Well, I was one of the schools I applied to as being one of the better schools of international relations at the time, 1950, and they gave me a full expense scholarship, which tipped the scales in their favor.
That's great. And so that's essentially why you were here.
Yeah.
Did you apply to other schools?
Fletcher, and I've forgotten, possibly Columbia.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when you were at SAIS, tell us what some of your memories were.
Well, first of all, it was different from the day we all lived in the, well, most of us lived in the building in which his classes were held on 19th in Florida. And it was more like a private boarding school that way, that actually most of us lived together, and therefore knew each other fairly well. We had our meals together in the dining room, and it was pretty self-contained, and it was always a neat deal. We could go down to the Library of Congress, load up a cab. It was all in the first cab zone, thanks to the congressman who designed this. So we could all go down to the Library of Congress and split the expense 4 or 5 ways. But and we hung around. We were at SAIS. We hung around the nearby Connecticut Avenue shopping area. They had an interesting restaurant there with an Irish name, a Greek cook, and a Filipino orchestra on Saturday night. And so we all got to know each other quite well and did a lot of socializing outside of the formal class or the formal school structure. The courses were somewhat, not my best academic performance here. There's somewhat different in, it's hard to explain, and not what I'd been used to. I'd come from Berkeley, most immediately, University of California, Berkeley, and I got into it, enjoyed a lot of it, especially I specialized in the Far East, and our Professor Linebarger was a delight, of course, to hear talk. And actually, I kept up with him after I graduated, practically until he died. I got to know him rather well afterwards. And unfortunately, my other favorite professor committed suicide, so that was kind of a down situation. That's as far as I know. Mm-hmm. It was said that he had. He wasn't the only one. The experience was good, I suppose, in sharpening research techniques as much as anything, and of course a lot of content on I absorbed, and that was useful. So especially I later, about 10 or 12 years later, I went back and got a doctorate at Penn in another area, which complemented I'd specialized in Southeast Asia there, and at Penn I'd specialized in South Asia, which is why I went to Penn, because they had a strong South Asian department. So anyway, they complemented each other very well, and after I graduated, I came from Berkeley, spent the summer at the infantry school at Fort Benning for a change of pace, came back here, and graduated and had a Fulbright, had applied for a Fulbright while at SAIS, and got it to the Philippines, which is in Southeast Asia, what I specialize in here. And all this was by surface transportation, incidentally, which is the way we did things more in those days. And so I took a freighter across the Pacific, another freighter through and to Europe, and came home in the old Queen Mary. Landed the job with CIA, which where I worked for 39 years. Got a leave for 1 year to get my to study South Asia primarily, and ended up I was a researcher there, started that way and ended up that way. Nothing successful in a not spectacular career of the CIA. Also remained in the Army Reserves and finished that up for 38 years in there and 39 years with the agency. Wow,
that's a long time.
Yeah, in the process I got to 85 countries, not all in business. Sometimes I take leave en route, sometimes I just travel on my own, but I was interested in seeing the world and saw a good deal of it, which was nice. Nothing else. So I was a researcher. I still research the same subject. I research the CIA, of course, using non-classified material, which about 90% of the available stuff is. And so I still maintain my interest in international communism, which is what I specialized in, and write a paper every year published by our local think tank. So it helps keep me busy. My life is not boring. I have that, and I have another continuous research problem on the Episcopal Church, which is splintering, just like the Communist Party splintered. And so functionally it's very similar. Between those two projects, I'm living in a retirement condo right now, rather restricted quarters, and I have papers strewn all over the place and files and all that sort of stuff. I'm very much into both of those subjects and have a great time doing it. And I would say SAIS long term, it certainly sharpened my research techniques. That was a good, best part of it, probably.
Well, tell us what other countries in the world. It sounds like you've been to 85. Where else did you live other than the Philippines?
I only lived, I was primarily Washington based, but I had, of course, my school year in Manila, first of all, my Fulbright. And then while with the agency, I did serve a year and a half in Vietnam, Saigon. But my interest in India is probably one of the big things. After I retired, I spent 5 weeks in India on the anniversary year of the 50th year of independence, this privately, and I did write an article that's only partially published on how much British influence is left after 50 years in India. I found a hell of a lot. I visited the major cities and major hill stations for each city, talked to people who were in professions that the Brits had been responsible for starting. I visited clubs, churches, any number, no government agencies, but any number of things, schools that were involved, the sort of thing that the Brits set up in the way that they're now operating. And there were people very friendly and very talkative. Of course, the middle class speaks English, so there was no language problem there. So it was all in all, it was a great experience. Next to India, I probably got more into the Philippines than any other country because when I had my Fulbright, I took courses about the Philippines and foreign affairs and politics, history, and all that sort of stuff. And and then I guess the other places I've lived very briefly, I lived a month in Beirut twice, 2 different times, which before the recent unpleasantness was a great place to visit. And I've visited some in West Africa, a lot in Asia, Japan several times, Burma and Thailand, Malaysia several times, and a lot in some in Latin America. And my banner year for tourism, I saw Iguazu Falls twice in one year. One, I thought it was so great when a cohort came down for a second trip to Brasilia where we had business. I had insisted that he see Iguazu Falls, so I went over there to see it again. And I've seen Angel Falls, which is the highest waterfall in the world. From the plane, they take you in Venezuela. They take you to this little jungle landing strip, but on the way they fly by the falls a couple of times, so you can get a good view. It's 3,000 feet in the highest waterfall in the world, of course, and it's hard to see from anywhere but the plane. But so anyway, those are kind of highlights.
What was the favorite, like the most favorite part of your career?
Of my career?
Yeah.
I suppose in the last years where I was involved in a lot of liaison work, we had set up a trip to Western Europe each year. We saw different government, our counterparts, largely in different intelligence services, and that was fun because we got to know these people, of course, and they would entertain us, and that was probably the most. And it was, again, I was primarily lecturing on international communism, which I did to American embassies abroad occasionally also, obviously focusing on their particular country. And so that was, and the putting puzzles together based on various pieces of intelligence or other information, that's kind of fun. I did throughout my career, functional especially, in my specialty of international communism. And
that's great. Now, thinking about your career, and you've certainly done a lot in 38, 39 years,
yeah.
And what you're currently doing now, you're still quite active. Thinking about current students today, what advice might you have for them?
Well, first of all, be open-minded, because what you think you're going to experience is often very different from what you end up experiencing. I mean, this goes from going to a new country to going to a new office back home. And if you have a set view of what it's going to be like, it's sometimes probably an inhibiting factor. So keeping an open mind is probably an important thing. And as far as countries go, I mean, I remember going very late in my career, going to Vietnam, and you don't realize that unless you're in a battle zone and they're actually firing and so forth, it can be just like anywhere else in the world, but because in a stress situation, obviously that's where the action is. But most of the time you're probably not going to be in that situation. And so it's just completely, you get off and you get off of the war area and you're afraid you assume you're going to be shot at. And you hear an explosion way off and you think it's going to have something to do with you when it doesn't. Especially the first few years. In Vietnam, some people were so psyched they had to go back. There is in one case for a good reason, there was a middle-aged woman. It came, and the second or third day, they rocketed the apartment next to hers. And unfortunately, nobody was there. It was not being occupied at the time. But that's completely psyched her, and she had to go home. She couldn't stand it psychologically. Although she passed all the tests and everything they give you to make sure you don't psych out. But I'll admit, for anybody, that'd be pretty, because your first few days, you tend to be jumpy in a situation like that. And when have something like that happen, but I mean, the rest of it was safer at night in Washington and Saigon because there's a cop on every corner practically, and the crime, the crime there was rather petty, like purse snatching and pickpocketing and I never heard of a case of mugging Washington style. Different people, different culture, and probably police protection was better. So anyway, that's
good. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your sharing your stories with us, and thanks so much for all you've done in the world and that you are doing. And we'll look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you
Thanks.
for having me.